Hello and welcome to my channel, Voluptas Ocularum. It means pleasure of the eye. My name is Stephanie. I'm a Canadian living in the UK, and today I have a video about sketchbooks. And recently I posted a sketchbook tour that went through 4 different sketchbooks. And I have purchased more sketchbooks. I've been working in more sketchbooks, but I got really curious about creating my own sketchbooks. And this is primarily because sketchbooks are really expensive, especially the kind that, you want to work in as a watercolor artist. When you start looking at 100% cotton sketchbooks that have, thick enough paper, they start getting into quite expensive territory. A sketchbook is meant to be a place where you can work without fear. And I just think if you're paying £90 for a sketchbook, that is not a place where you can work without fear. So I got kind of curious, what would it take to create my own watercolor sketchbook? And this weekend I had a full day and I finally decided that I'm going to try to do this on my own. So first what I'm going to do is show you the sketchbooks that I created, and then I'm going to tell you how I did it and mention a couple of tutorials that I used. And I just want to tell you, you don't need any special bookbinding equipment. I'm not going to be sewing anything. This is like the most basic, easiest sketchbook creation technique that I have found. The pages do lie flat, and they allow you to create a sketchbook of any kind of paper that you want, as well as any kind of size and orientation that you want. So I'm just going to show you a couple of examples of what I was able to create in the past day, basically. So the first is this small sketchbook, and I did this as like a little basic test of the technique because I wanted to figure out like what I could do with this technique. I had like a couple pages left in a Strathmore watercolor pad. It was a spiral bound pad, and it was about an A3 size pad. And I had this forever, and I just had a couple pages left, but I don't really like using it as large A3 pages. So I thought it would be better put to use as a small sketchbook. So basically what this is several folded pages that I cut down to a size. It's, let's see, 5.5 inches by 5 inches. So it's a pretty small, almost square sketchbook. And as you can see, this is a folded spread. And, if I clip down the pages, it basically lies flat. And this is the gutter page. So this is where 2 different pages come together and create, a gutter in the middle. And I don't mind that because oftentimes when I'm working in sketchbooks, I might do a page here and a page here, and then when I have a larger like open spread page like this, I could do something across the entire spread. Now the tutorial that I watched actually glued these 2 pages together so that you would always be opening up to a non-gutter page, but I just felt like that was a waste of paper because it's thick enough to take, whatever I want on both sides, so I might as well do it. So what you see here is a sketchbook that has been glued. So basically this is all stacked together and glued. I glued it just once with book glue, and then I used a bookbinding tape that I bought in a roll off Amazon to bind, to go over top of the edge, and basically just give it a little more security. And then I cut and pasted the cover of the Strathmore spiral bound thing onto the front and back, so just so that I would remember what kind of paper it was. But basically this was like my proof of concept that I could make this work. And this is small, but I then went on to create 3 actually quite large watercolor journals. So this one is, I'm just going to zoom out slightly here so you can see my messy edges. This one is 7.5 by 11 inches. And this is basically a quarter sheet of arches folded in half. So at its full size, it is 11 inches by 15 inches, which is a quarter imperial sheet. So you can get 4 quarter sheets out of 1 full sheet. I did the exact same technique as with the other one. You can see that it lays flat. If I clip it down, it's perfectly flat. And this is what the gutter pages look like. There is glue showing here because I'm not a professional, but that's fine. What am I gonna, I don't need to use that. I can just tape off this and use this as its own page in its own right. Or do a couple of different panels on these pages. The more important thing is that on the right side of the paper, which is the more textured side, it is the full spread page with no gutter. And there's also no stitching, as you see. This is a stitch-free sketchbook, so it's just glued and taped. That's it. So what I did do differently on this one is at the front and the back, I added in an extra sheet, an extra folded sheet of just cartridge paper. This is 300 GSM cartridge paper. I think it's called Snowden, and I got like a big pad of that from Jackson's, and it's quite cost effective. So I did that at the beginning and the end. I just added it into the sketchbook stack, I guess. And then I did that because I didn't want to glue a cover to the watercolor paper itself. I wanted to have all of the sheets of watercolor paper available to paint on. So as you can see, I added in this hard cover, and it's very plain and basic. This is just cut from the back of a watercolor block that I had used. So this is all recycled basically. So I didn't want to glue this front page to a watercolor page. So I basically just added in the cartridge paper as an extra thing. And I'll use that to write my information. I can use it for swatching. I can use it for taking notes or whatever I want. It's basically just an extra protective page. And so what I have here is a beautiful, when it's fully open, 11 by 15 Arches watercolor sketchbook that cost approximately £21 for me to create, plus a few little materials like glue and tape, and I reused the cover. So if you needed to buy that, it might cost you a couple extra pounds. So this is the big one. This is from a half size imperial sheet, and these are all Saunders Waterford. This is not Saunders Waterford. This is my inside sheet, which I used Winsor & Newton 25% cotton for, because it was the only paper that I had that was big enough to fill this inside sheet. This is the Saunders Waterford. So yeah, with this I had purchased a multi-pack deal from Bromley's where they had, and they have this with Arches as well, I believe, and it's still going on now as of August 2025. On Bromley's, you can get 2 packs of paper. As long as they're the same weight, they can be any type of, any combination of paper otherwise. So it could be hot press, cold press, rough, and they have different sizes that you can select. So I had bought Saunders Waterford. This is 200 pound, so I think it's 425 GSM, so it's actually thicker than the Arches. And I bought the cold press and the rough in the high white. So that came to, I think it was 39 pounds each per pack, and it came with 10 half sheets. So that's £3.90 per half sheet, and that's £1.80 or something. Is that right? £1.85 or £1.90 per sheet. Per page, actually. So I took the 10 pages that I had and I folded them in half, and I created this enormous, this is 11 by 15, or let's see how big it is. Where's my ruler? So a full half size sheet, I think, is 22 by 15. So this is this whole thing is a half size sheet of watercolor paper. And that means I have 11 by 15 to paint on. And the reason I did this instead of just using them as sheets is because for some reason I I find it very difficult to paint large when it's just sheets. I feel like very intimidated by that, but if it's in a sketchbook, I can do it. So I really wanted a large watercolor sketchbook, but the cost is absolutely prohibitive if you are trying to get something that's like A3 size or anything over an A4 size for watercolor and I have never seen anything that had 200-pound Saunders Waterford paper in it. So this, I made it myself. The same technique as all the other sketchbooks. It's glued and then taped. It's basically just folded pieces of paper and that have been glued together. I know that Will J. Bailey makes handmade watercolor sketchbooks, and they run anywhere from like 26 pounds for a super tiny one that's like this big to 144 pounds for something that I think it was 28 centimeters by 38. So what's that? That would be this size. So if you bought this size from Will J. Bailey, it would cost you 144 pounds. And it only cost me 39 pounds for all this paper. So you can really make your own watercolor sketchbooks at a fraction of the price, and it is super easy. It's really, really easy. So I'm going to show you the technique that I used. First, let's talk about the tools you need. I have like a A3 size cutting mat. I have a metal ruler. I have a bone folder, but you could use anything that will not leave a mark that you can use to fold paper. And I just make sure that I don't have anything on the folder, so that's going to transfer onto the paper. But this is also going to be useful for creasing. So if you do have a bone folder, I would highly recommend using it. I used this glue. I have no idea if it's archival. I don't know anything about it other than that it was $5.99 on Amazon, and I didn't want to pay 14 pounds for a large thing of glue. This is the shittiest watercolor brush ever. It came with like a kit from Faber-Castell. I think it's for children, and they're totally glued together. It doesn't matter because all you need it for is to spread the glue around. And then I have some large binder clips, and like this. So these open up quite thick, and that's important. You will need something that opens up quite thick in order to hold your gigantic stack of watercolor paper together. So these ones I think are 41 mils wide, and they open up to about 2 centimeters or a little bit more. I think it's about 2 centimeters that they open up to. And I have a whole bunch of them that I use to clip things together. And then the last thing that I used is this tape. I just looked up bookbinding tape, and this came up, and people have used it to repair books before, so I decided it was good enough for me. So those are all of the tools you need, and then obviously you're going to need a knife to cut your paper to the right size, and you might need a pencil to mark your measurements. So the next watercolor sketchbook that I'm going to make is actually a square, arches, what is this? 640 GSM, bright white, arches cold press paper. And I did this little sample because I wanted to see if it would actually fold without, breaking. And what I ended up doing is scoring it first with my bone folder. I basically just that all off. I basically just marked where I wanted to fold, and I used my straight edge and my bone folder to just create a crease, and then it basically just folded super easy, and I could flatten it like that. So I'm folding it cold press, like texture side in, so that my spreads on the creased full spread image are on the right side of the paper, and then my gutter pages are going to be the back side of the page. So these are half sheets, and Jackson's has a paper cutting service, so you can actually just order single sheets of whatever type of paper that you're looking to use, and as long as it's single sheets, not the 5 or 10 packs, if it's single sheet, you can actually tell them to cut them to size, so you can choose half sheet or quarter sheet, and these are half sheets of the paper weight. And out of these I can get 3 of these spread sizes. So this sketchbook is going to be 7.5 inches by 7.5 inches. Or if you're centimeters person, 19 by 19 centimeters. So that's the exact same size as a Stillman and Byrne square softcover sketchbook. So you're going to need your watercolor paper, and then I would recommend, if you have another like non-watercolor paper that you can use for the inside and outside cover. So I'm going to dig through my paper collection and just see if I have anything else that I could use for that. I'd probably end up using Canson watercolor paper because I have lots of it and it's cheap. And that'll just be, you'll just need one sheet of that cut to the same size as this for the inside and the outside cover. So for this, the first thing I'm going to do is just measure out all of my measurements onto my pages. So I have the one that I used as a test, and now I'm going to go through and measure out all of the rest of my sheets. I have 3 more sheets here that I'm going to measure out to the same size as this, which will basically be 15 inches by 7.5 inches. And I am keeping the deckled edge at the bottom. So I have made sure that all my paper is facing the same direction and that all of the edges are deckled in the same direction as well. And yeah, so as soon as I have those ready and cut out, I will be back to show you the next step. Okay, so now that all of our pages are cut to size, this is 15 inches by 7.5 inches, I just sort of stacked them all up to make sure that they aligned and it looks pretty good. Now this is a really thick paper, like I said, so I wasn't sure that it could actually be turned into a sketchbook because it's so thick, but it seemed to have done pretty well in my test page. So now basically what I'm doing is marking the center of the page, which is 7.5 inches. And the next step is to go through and basically crease all of the pages in the center where you want to fold them. Now I'm making sure that the rougher side, or the more textured side, which is the front part of the paper, is the part that I'm going to be folding in on. And the other side, which is the smoother side, is going to be on the outside of the fold. So how I'm doing this is I'm just using my straight edge here to align the marks where I denote the center. And I'm taking my bone folder and I'm just pressing down to crease it. So no fancy creasing equipment needed here, no scoring equipment. And as you can see, it creates a pretty great score line just like that. Now I'm gently going to bring these two sides together, and at a certain point you'll feel it start to fold. Now the back side does crack a little bit, but I don't think it's going to break. I've seen other people do this and they said not to worry about it if it's cracked on the back. So I'm going to use my bone folder to just straighten that out a little bit, and I'm going to turn it over and do that part again. And now I have a fairly well folded page, I guess. So that's 2 pages that I have now. And basically I'm just going to keep going with this process, and I'll do this on time lapse so that you can see me creasing and folding the rest of the pages. Okay, so I have my stack of folded sheets, and yeah, it's quite thick. The paper is quite thick, but I'm gonna kind of get them all together as best I can. I'm not super concerned if they are not fully perfectly straightly aligned. I just need them to be aligned on the bottom edge and on the side, the fold side. And as long as they're all aligned there, then the next step is basically to clamp them together and start gluing. So I'm going to get my binder clips out, and these actually might be too small for this job, so I might need to use something bigger. Okay, it took some doing, but I finally got my two largest clamps around. So if you're doing really thick paper, you might want to consider getting some larger clamps or just doing less paper. This is going to be 20 sheets or 40 pages, but you could definitely do a little bit less than that. So once you have it all clamped together, the next step is to glue it. So I'm just going to be using this book glue, and it clears, it dries clear. That's all I really know about it. It's supposedly flexible, dries clear, has a precision tip, whatever. I just got cheapest book glue I could find. So yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and glue this. I'm applying as much as I can. And the idea is that you want this to securely bond all of these folded edges together. So you don't want any spots that are not covered with glue. So I'm just being very generous with my application here. And I know that this is spreading out in the center right now because it's not clamped there, but I'm going to be putting some heavy books on top of this afterwards to keep it all together. So I'm not too worried about that. So now I'm just taking my shitty paintbrush and spreading that around. And I know that a lot of people recommend using PVA glue, and I would definitely try it. I just didn't have the time and patience to wait for new glue to arrive. So I decided to go with what was readily available for me in the time that I wanted to do this. So if I turn this on the edge, you can see that there's still some spots that don't have glue. So I'm going to just keep applying until it's fully covered. And like the only purpose of this paintbrush is to spread the glue around. So it doesn't have to be particularly flexible or good. I used this brush to spread the glue on my other sketchbooks that I made, and the glue dried hard on it, and I just kind of peeled it off once it was dry. And yeah. So one thing I didn't do with this sketchbook was put on covering pages on the outside and inside covers. I just couldn't find any paper that I had available at the moment to do that. So this is just going to be raw. I'm not going to put a cover on it, and I don't think it really needs one because the paper is very thick. So I'm just going to go over the top and the bottom, where the top and bottom spreads are kind of separated from the rest, just to make sure they are securely glued to the rest. Now this glue is going to get sort of in between some of the spreads, and that's totally fine. Once it's dry and you open it up, that will flexibly open. So as soon as you have the entire spine glued, the next step is to put it down and place some heavy objects on top. So I'm going to take these clamps off. They were just to sort of keep all the pages in place while I was gluing, and I'm going to replace it with heavy books. Okay, so I know I said I wasn't going to have a cover, but I realized that was silly. I definitely need a cover for this sketchbook. So I found this Canson watercolor paper, and I've just sized it to the same proportion as the sketchbook itself. So that's 7.5 by 7.5 inches. And I have creased it and folded it. And you need one cover for the back and one cover for the front. I guess technically you could just do a single sheet, not a folded sheet, but I wanted to give the sketchbook like on the edges something to grip onto, and I felt like a single sheet was maybe not going to cut it. So yeah, I just done these folded sheets. I'm going to add them onto the stack like this, and then I need to clamp it and add a little bit of glue along these edges and let that dry just a little bit. It doesn't have to be as dry as the rest of the spine because we're going to use bookbinding tape to basically put the whole thing together. Okay, so I've clamped these covers onto the sketchbook, and now I am applying a little bit of glue directly onto my brush that I used previously and using it to sort of fill in this front and back crack. So now that that is all glued together, I'm just going to go back and add just a tiny bit of extra. And now after this is kind of looking adhered together, we can go ahead and take out the bookbinding tape that we purchased. And mine is pretty thick. I think it's around 2 inches thick. So it actually works perfectly for this size. If you have a smaller sketchbook, you might want to trim the tape down to make sense for your page. But for me, this is actually just the right size. So basically what you want to do is try to center it on the spine and then just sort of wrap it around the edges. And this is going to add an extra layer of strength to the spine itself to really help keep everything all together. So I'm starting from one edge because I felt like if I started from the center, I wasn't going to be able to pull it tightly enough. And after I've secured it along one edge, I'm sort of pulling the tape up and over the other edge to create a really firm and strong bond, and making sure that like all of the pages are sort of as closely squished together as possible because you want them to really join together. And now I'm just smoothing the tape over the sketchbook spine. You can see that there's like lumps and bumps. That's where the paper has created these ridges, but that, you know, that's just an aesthetic thing. If it bothers you, I guess you could go to another effort and try to cover it, but for me, I don't really mind. After you're happy with the bookbinding tape, you can remove all of the clamps and take a look at the edge and see if it needs any extra work. So I made my tape a little bit longer than the sketchbook itself, and now I'm just going to trim off the end pieces so that it looks a little bit more tidy. Now that we have this really nicely bound sketchbook, I was thinking this is the right time to add even more customization. So I'm going to add one extra sheet to the front and back as a cover. And this is the point at which, if you wanted this to be a hardcover sketchbook, you would cut out some card and use that and glue it onto the front and back inside sheets that we created. And that way it protects it from the watercolor paper inside. I'm once again going to just let it dry for about half an hour with some heavy books on top. And that's just going to make sure that that last remaining glue that I applied and the tape are all adhering together perfectly. For the cover, I'm just reusing an old swatch page that I created, and I liked the look of it. I thought it was really colorful and pretty, and I probably wasn't going to be using it for anything else, so I thought it would make a perfect cover for this watercolor journal. And I'm just cutting it down to size, 1 square for the front and 1 square for the back. I have to admit, it is so satisfying to flip through this book now that it's mostly dry, and just seeing these pages and how well it holds together, it makes me really happy and excited to use the sketchbook. So I'm just checking the binding and making sure there's no issues and that all of the pages feel like they're really securely bound together. And now I'm just going to use these cut out sheets from my old swatch page and apply some of the same bookbinding glue. I don't know, I probably could have used a different glue, but I just had this one available, so I decided to use it. I thought if it was good enough for the spine, it's probably good for the cover as well. Now, the final step is to paint, paint in this journal. And this is me from the future coming back to show you some of the work that I've started to create in this journal. As usual, I start from the back of my watercolor sketchbooks, just helps me get over the fear of the first page. And I so love the way that watercolor shows up in this sketchbook on this really heavy Arches paper. And I truly could not have afforded a sketchbook like this if I was buying it. I can't even afford like the 140-pound version. So the fact that I was able to do this 300-pound version myself for like a fraction of the price just means I have the opportunity to work on paper that's incredibly luxurious and actually helps me learn more about the medium itself. So I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you want to see other work that I've created in my sketchbooks, I'm including a few videos that you can go and check out now and see my sketchbook progress over the past 2 years. Bye.